Tonight for supper I'm having beef pepper and tomatoes, so I figured I was just going to show everybody else how it's actually made. It's I guess you could say it's a stir fry, but it has very few ingredients, so less prep. But basic ingredients are tomatoes, peppers, a few onions, a bit of green onion for garnish. This is actually sirloin steak, and I'll be using a little bit of cornstarch, a little bit of garlic, and the main ingredient I had to run down to an Asian market to pick this up. It's basically called salted black bean, or it's commonly referred to as fermented black bean. It's not really a black bean though, it's just basically soybeans that are been fermented and turned black, and then they salt them, and it's all part of just trying to preserve them. So I just basically just went down and bought just this because this, is the key ingredient in this whole recipe. So I got to start out by prepping everything up. Obviously washing the peppers and tomatoes and cutting them up into bite-sized pieces. And so I might go through a little bit of that, but I'm probably not going to do that right at this moment. So I'll be back. Okay, I'm just going to start out by cutting up the onions. They're actually going to be the first thing that goes into the pot or the wok if you actually had one. But the nice thing about this recipe is it actually doesn't require a wok. I'm not going to be using one because obviously I got a flat top electric stove that really doesn't it would be kind of difficult for me to use a wok on this particular stove. So as with most Chinese cooking, the major thing is actually the major process is actually prepping everything before you before you cook it, and the cooking process only takes a little bit of time. So I'm just going to get everything cut up as quickly as I can here, and move on to cooking. So as far as the onions go, really all you have to do is we're going to cut it. I'm just going to, this size onion, I'm just going to cut up into like 3 slices, and then just, cut it into cubes, which are probably about like that. And just throw them into a bowl until I'm ready to cook them. Okay, then I'm going to move on to cutting up the tomatoes. When you do this, I guess that you can use. It's kind of meant, I think, for me. I usually cook this kind of stuff around this time of year, probably a little bit earlier in the in the fall. When you're getting a lot of the vegetables out of the garden. The reality is these tomatoes are actually store-bought tomatoes, obviously because they're pretty much all just uniform in size. They are a little bit maybe riper than maybe a traditional store-bought tomato, where they sometimes are kind of hard, but using a store-bought tomato that is kind of hard might be, you know, ideal for this recipe, because the reality is that during the cooking process, you don't want you want the tomatoes to cook down to mush. You want them kind of semi-firm. So I'm going to use these in this case and try not to cook them that long, but they aren't quite garden quality, you know, tomatoes, because obviously they're not perfect. That's why I'm cutting out so much. But they are, you know, perfectly fine to use for, you know, this recipe, or beef, pepper, and tomato. So, and being big like this obviously means that I'm, you know, having to spend less time cutting up tomatoes and cutting them than if I was using some other type of tomato like a Roma or a plum tomato or something like that. But the only reason I'm using these is because I have to use them up. And they'll be perfectly fine for, like I say, this purpose. So, in the case of tomatoes, what I'm probably going to do is, you know, I guess the whole point is you want to cut up everything into more or less bite-sized pieces. So what I'm going to do, because these are so big, I'm going to cut them in, split them in half, and then split them in quarters, and then probably eighths, which, you know, gives you a piece that's like that. And then, you know, the other part you got to consider is that they are going to cook a little bit. So the thing is that they'll, you know, get a little bit smaller, you know, during the cooking process. So, I guess, you know, with Chinese food, you know, you're usually trying to just make sure that everything is more or less bite-sized. So you don't have to use a fork. I'm sorry, not a fork, but a knife to try to cut everything up. And so that's all I'm trying to do. As far as, you know, the quantity of peppers and tomatoes in the recipe, you usually want to just have, try to have about the same quantity of pepper and tomatoes, or equal parts peppers and tomatoes, not by volume, but, or not by weight, but volume. So essentially, you're going to, you know, have half pepper and tomato in the when you're cooking them. So that's what I'm doing here. I'm gonna have to probably break out and start using my new knife sooner or later here. I just decided to grab this one, which I probably should have sharpened before I started the video, but I guess I'll get by. So, okay, see, in addition, I guess that the beans that I actually purchased, you can buy bean paste. I don't know, you know, I can't really tell you, you know, what type it was. I know that I look online and I see some stuff where they, in theory, have what's called like Chilean bean or whatever, and you don't want to use anything like that for this stir fry. You just want, basically, if it was anything and you got like a paste, it would be bean paste. But all I'm gonna do to make the bean paste that I need for this recipe is just use a food processor to, you know, chop them up, and add a little bit of which is usually, it's typically just mushroom soy and not just regular soy, that soy sauce you'd like buy for your, you know, whatever, your American style chow mein, you know, because it's kind of a little bit too salty. So I'll show that in a bit. Hopefully I don't, you know, but I actually I'll have to use it in cooking, so I'll be able to show it to you at that point. But it's mushroom soy, and it's traditionally it's just soy sauce that actually doesn't have so much salt in it. Made out of, mushrooms, I guess, which is pretty obvious. So I'm done with this. I have to, I suppose, just flip over the cutting board and clean the stove off after that. But I don't know where I put them. Okay, but I probably do have a few less peppers than I have tomatoes, but not by much. So in the process, I guess I'm just going to do the green onions real quick. What I want to do is I want to just basically just flush up the tips of them, and then cut that off, and then I'll take the rubber band off. And usually what you can do is after you wash them, you just basically you just want to take maybe that little bit off of there at the very tip, which may be just a little bit dried out or whatever. Some of them don't have anything that really looks all that bad, so I'm not going to worry about it. Because obviously we're just going to, this is more or less, it's not for flavor or anything like that. It's more or less just a garnish. And so, this one had a little bit, so I'm going to peel that off. That one looks okay. Depending on how they are, I mean, sometimes when they're not so, maybe fresh or whatever, you can just basically take your hand and just, you can just grab onto it real tight and basically just pull it right off. So like I say, this is going to be garnish, and so I only really just grabbed one green onion, and I'm going to split the white part in half or in quarters, depending on how, if the first time I don't, cut it all the way straight, I'll just cut it again, just so that they're not any real thick pieces of white green, the white part of the green onion in the stir fry when it's done. Then you can do green onion, you don't have to worry about, because obviously I guess for the size they are. If the green end was, the green tips were a lot wider or whatever, maybe I'd split them in half too, but as they are, this is just fine. So I'm just going to cut them into like uniform lengths. I don't know, maybe whatever, like an inch and a half. And just put them into a bowl. And then I might just, I'm going to prep the peppers. But the usual process for me, this is actually obviously a pretty small pepper, more like one that comes out of a person's garden than what you buy at the store. They're thin and not very big, but they're still peppers. So all I'm going to do is I basically split it in half, and then I take and I pull the center out, and then I tap it to get rid of the seeds, and then basically I want to have something like that. And so I'm not going to probably do all the peppers on camera, but I'll just kind of give you an idea of what they look like, or what they, the size they should be. So in the case of this pepper, I'm going to cut it into thirds, and then those thirds I'm going to cut into half. So essentially we got peppers, we got tomatoes that are about the same size. I mean, the pepper, like I say, the tomato is going to cook down more than the pepper. And so, being a little bit smaller, the tomatoes being a little bigger, or peppers being a little smaller, probably, by the end of the cooking time, they're both going to be about the same size. So, that's what I'm going to do with the peppers. I'm I might come back on screen when I cut up the beef because there's some, important steps for doing that. But in the meantime, I'm just going to cut up the pepper. So I'll be back when I start on the beef. And I think I got, no, actually after the beef and stuff like that, I just really got to cook rice, and then I got to cook the beef, pepper, and tomato up, and then I'm ready to eat. So I'll be back. Okay, I got done cutting up my peppers, and so I guess you can see that proportionally there's probably similar amounts of each for this recipe. And then was cutting up these beef packages. So essentially these, I don't know if you could find these in a regular store. I believe it's probably meant to be sold to commercial companies, like restaurants and hospitals and so forth and so on, because I don't know that I've ever seen anything like this at a like Walmart or any other grocery store. But essentially what it is beef. It is actually sirloin steak. It's just, smaller pieces. So it actually works out good for me to use that for stir fry, because obviously, I'm going to cut it up into pieces even smaller than that, before I'm done. So I'm going to go through a little bit of this and cut it up, and then I'll have to essentially, add the seasoning and stuff like that to the meat, and get it ready to cook. And then I'd probably have to cut off the video and come back when I start cooking, because I need to cook rice yet before I cook the main stir fry up, and all that'll take some time. But essentially when I cut the beef, you always want to cut the beef against the grain. So in theory, or not in theory, but what you'd actually be doing with this piece here looks like we're going to be cutting it actually against the grain would probably be just like this. So we're completely through it. So if I cut it like this, you could actually do that. But the beef is not going to be tough if I cut it up into smaller pieces. It just, I'm going to slice it into something thin enough, and I can still cut it against the grain somewhat by cutting it this way. And so I'm going to end up with pieces that are probably, about like that. Not too thick, that they don't cook in a reasonably quick amount of time, and not too big that they're actually, you can't, fit one in your mouth at a time. So I'm going to have to cut all the steak up. And then, like I say, once I get done with that, I'll have to go on to the next, step in the process. So in this case, I guess I'm going to go this way. And then, in order to make sure they're small enough, I just kind of split them in half again. So actually, you can see maybe that I have something that's a little bit larger than, or longer than it should be. So, but about the thickness I want it to be. So all I have to do is cut it in half. What I'm going to do is I'm going to, like I say, I got a few more to cut up here, and I don't want to, waste time on camera just doing it all. It won't take me that long to do, but I guess I'm just not going to do it on cam, and then I need to get grab another bowl for it and get that ready. But in the meantime, I also maybe want to drain off of some of the blood from the beef that I still haven't cut up yet, because it probably wouldn't matter, but When you mix it with the cornstarch, you want to have the beef as, possibly as dry as possible, as, least bloody as possible, because you mix cornstarch in it, and obviously the blood dilutes the cornstarch and, kind of defeats the purpose of, having the cornstarch on there. But, if I let it drain just a little bit, it should be fine. So I'm going to go ahead and let it go for a little bit, and then I'll be back. Okay, I'm on to the final steps in the process. Actually, I'm going to season, marinate the meat. Then I'm going to throw everything in the pot and cook it. So, first off, I guess I made the bean paste. I guess it's kind of thick. All I did was use the beans, and essentially this time I decided to use my coffee grinder, or one of the coffee grinders I had, because it's a small bowl like it is, and I put about a quarter or a third of the bag of beans in there, which these are actually the beans, and then the soy sauce that I was mentioning. Usually you can find this at Asian markets. They usually use it a lot, obviously, in Chinese cooking and other cooking. But like I say, this brand is Pearl River Bridge, and it's mushroom soy sauce. But the reason they usually use it in cooking, like I say, is because more or less, mostly because it has less salt in it and probably more flavor. I've had this jug or this container for quite a long time, because I don't cook Chinese food every day, but I like to have it, or have it when I can. So what I did then is I actually put a third of the bag of beans into the coffee grinder bowl, and I added a little bit of soy sauce to dilute it down so that it would actually mix and not just be heavy sludge inside of there. And it worked out pretty good. So I got that done. I'll use that when I start cooking. But now I'm going to actually do the beef. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to fire up the burner. Just turn it on to high. And obviously this one basically just has a double burner, so both are on. So in order to do the beef, I'm going to just start out with adding a little bit of see, this is basically baking soda, which in theory is supposed to tenderize the meat a little bit, and mix that in real good. And then I'm going to go on to add my. I'll shoot it in, leave it on the thing here. You can add other seasonings, but I'm just going to go with a little bit of garlic. I guess the amount of garlic really, you can never be hurt how much garlic you actually put into it. And obviously I washed my hands, and I'll wash them again and again. But okay, so I did that. I'm going to add a touch of salt. Not very much. And mix it together. Then wash my hands again. And I'm going to add my cornstarch. So, when you mix that in, the cornstarch, obviously I'm going to mix it up with my hands, but obviously I keep on washing my hands to make sure they're clean. And, you can wear gloves if you want, but I guess I just always been used to doing it this way. Unfortunately, that's all the garlic or all the cornstarch I have left. So I'm just going to add a little bit of flour to the mixture so that I can at least get a little in there. This is okay actually the way it's actually mixed. It should be fine. I'll pull my pot back onto the burner so it's getting hot. And then I'm going to set my beef aside for a second because I need to put some oil into my pot. Maybe let it get just a touch hotter before I started adding anything into it. And so what I decided I'm going to do is I'm actually not going to attempt to cook everything that I have. I'm only going to cook half of everything that I prepped up, and then I'm going to maybe just cook the same thing, a night from now, tomorrow night, who knows, but I guess I won't be able to have it all eaten if I cook the whole work. So start out by adding the onions. And at the temperature the pot is actually at. I'm not going to wait that long before adding the beef. Because when you find that you see that the pot is at the right temperature. It shouldn't have too much sticking, but it might still stick a little bit, but that's it, can be expected. What I'm trying to do now is separate the beef so that it can all cook. Along with the onions. And I'm gonna wash my hands again. So obviously we want to have the onions kind of be transparent, and that's the only thing you really don't have. You want to have any crunch to it or any hard texture. Besides the green onions, which you might have, they might be a little bit hard, but the white onions or the yellow onions or whatever you decide to use should be fairly cooked. And you can maybe see what I have so far in the pot is getting partially cooked. But like any stir fry, it usually cooks pretty fast. So I'm going to go ahead and add, I don't know, I'm going to add about that much bean paste, and then a little bit more for good measure, and maybe just a little bit more, and get that all mixed in. you'll see probably by the time everything's done, it's not going to be, have any appearance, so you probably maybe don't see so much redness, or what this is, the meat is in there. But this is actually a starter. When I put the beans, the bean paste in there, it'll start to burn on the bottom of the pot, but that'll soon be remedied. So what I'm going to do is go on to adding half of my peppers. I want the peppers to try to cook just a little bit longer than the tomatoes, which the tomatoes we're going to just try to get more or less just maybe heated through. So and you can see what we have right now. As you add everything to it, it becomes a bit much, but see my belly, you can see I've probably never been on a diet in my life, so I enjoy eating, I enjoy cooking, so I'm on to the adding tomatoes. Like I say, when you get to the tomatoes, you're actually maybe only trying to warm them through so they're just, hot, and not necessarily try to cook them, because you want to have them kind of look like, still look like tomatoes when you plate it. I just, pretty much put it over rice. So this is what we have right now. Is, it's probably tempered or warmed all the way through, but it's not. I'm just going to leave it just a little bit longer before I add the green onions in them and plate it up to eat. So that, I guess, if you've never had the black bean before, you may want to try it and somewhere else, or maybe even see if I don't know if they have already, serve it in too many Chinese restaurants, because I don't go eat out that much, but do a few. So what I have right now looks pretty good. Looks like about as much as I want to cook it. So I'm going to go ahead and actually add half of the green onions and call it good. Probably hear it sounds like it's starting to boil, but so I'm going to cut off the heat. Mix it up just a little bit more. And you can see if you actually didn't have to prep up all the ingredients, it wouldn't take that long to with pre-existing ingredients to actually just make it. So see, I guess I'm getting kind of hungry, so I'm going to just grab myself a plate and dish it up. So I have the rice. I just cooked enough rice to make sure that I have enough for cooking most of this. If I don't use this, maybe I'd use it for some other thing, like I have gumbo or whatever. But anyway, I'm going to There it is. Beef, pepper, and tomato. Guess you could say it like I say, it's a stir fry, but I think it's pretty easy to prepare as long as you can use a knife and cut up all the vegetables and stuff like you need. But other than that, it's ready to go, and I'm